I know I'm live, and this is a bit awkward, but I don't know if anybody's watching yet. We've had some technical difficulties, and up there's Elizabeth. I'm going to ask Elizabeth to join right now. Okay. People joining in. This is good. Hi, Michelle from AFA. It's good to see you. So I had some technical difficulties. I have a brand new phone. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, everybody.
Just explaining to everybody that I have a new phone that is not recognizing the Fit Museum Instagram account. We don't know why. Elizabeth and I tested this yesterday, and we had a really good, actually hour-long conversation. It was fabulous. I wish you all could have been there. But so we're trying this on my personal account, and then hopefully we'll be able to capture it and just put it over onto the Fit Museum account. So sorry, everybody, for the confusion. But thank you, Elizabeth, for joining me today in a different room. We're in a great big Newport mansion right now, but we're not in the ballroom. Instead, we're in the breakfast room. So, yeah.
Love that idea. Love that visual. Absolutely. So glad to be with you. And I see everyone
I,
listening.
yes, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry about this. And I just want to say good morning to everybody on the West Coast. Good afternoon to where you are, Elizabeth, and good evening to everybody overseas. I do want to introduce Elizabeth Block. She is really marvelous, and honestly, it's like I feel like we are kindred spirits in the things that we are interested in, the topics of dress history, and especially the book that we're going to talk about today, which is your newest publication, which is absolutely fantastic, called Dressing Up. And I have my copy here. We'll do dual.
Oh,
Dressing Up the women who influenced French fashion. And so this is an American take, really, on this topic that has had a lot of publications, a lot of research. But I have to say, Elizabeth, we've both read tons and tons of books and memoirs and biographies and fashion journals and all sorts of things about the topic of French couture, the 19th century dress industry. But I have never been so amazed by the amount of brand new research that you have brought to the field through this publication. It's been thrilling for me each chapter, thinking, oh my God, what am I going to learn that honestly I've never come across before? And that's been an exciting thing.
for saying that. You can tell I go deep into the research. I think I might have been a librarian in a past life.
That's right. That's right. Let me introduce you really quickly. This is Elizabeth L. Block, PhD. She is an art historian and senior editor of publications and the editorial department at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. She's contributed to many publications, including American Art and West 86, a journal of decorative arts, design history, and material culture. Her book, Dressing Up Women Who Influenced French Fashion, came out this year, 2021, and was published by the MIT Press. And it is available wherever books are sold, which is exciting. You can get it online. I've been in bookstores, and I'm like, ooh, there it is, and I know that lady. So please get a copy of the book. And I'm sorry, this is backwards, I know, for you, but just look for this magnificent velvet gown, which Elizabeth actually is going to talk about. And we'll get to see the woman who actually wore it. So, Elizabeth, this is going to be wonderfully informal. We just get to talk about all the things that we want to talk about, and that means you get to talk about what you want to talk about for your book.
I'm so thrilled about this. And yes, I love the cover image. It was my first choice, and MIT went with it. So this is a House of Worth gown from 1898. It's red velvet, and it was worn by Edith Kingdon Gould. She was from the East Coast, and it's just such a fantastic find. The dress is in the private collection of a descendant of Mrs. Gould, and the descendant lives in Washington, D.C., and I couldn't be more thankful to her descendant for sharing images. And, of course, this all happened during the pandemic, where I would have been, down in the apartment there looking at the gown. And they also have, this collector also has, and here I go with my first, my
Right.
first I feel like this is an iconic moment, like the Vanna White moment, where I get to hold out my stapled to the manila folder in Kevin Jones style. So see the Worth gown, and then you see Mrs. Gould. She's wearing the gown, and she's also wearing, as you can see, the a fur stole that is also still in the Descendants collection, and the fur
Wow.
stole was in the invoice of her death record. So when she died, her clothing was, you know, accounted for, and so were many of her accessories, and it included the stole and many other items. And so she was first an actress, and then she married Mr. Gould, an industrialist, and she became, you know, a member of high society. And so, like the other women that I talk about in Dressing Up, she went to Paris, you know, once, twice a year, ordered her dresses from Worth, Félix, Doucet, Pingot, all the others, and you know, came home with trunks of gowns. And you know, thank goodness they were they were kept really well, and you get to enjoy them today. And over at FIDM, you get to enjoy them storage every day. I'm here at the
Right.
back, extraordinarily lucky to be able to call on colleagues downstairs and at times go into storage. But as you know, it's a rare event. But being able to see these women in their gowns and in portraits, you know, society portraitists is really where the passion comes for this book.
Does the family have additional clothes that were packed away in the trunks?
They do, and a couple of so she started as like a singer and actress, and so they have some of the garments that she wore.
And also, does the family still have that portrait, or is that portrait now in a museum collection?
The portrait is in the family collection as well.
That's amazing that
Yeah.
all that has been kept in a family collection. So much of that, you know, wonderfully is donated to institutions for institutional care, such as the Met and, you know, the Fitted Museum for Garments. We don't have paintings, but, you know, that's an amazing family legacy that somebody's maintaining.
It is, and you know, again, like this fellow in Washington D.C. who's, you know, just so proud of the family legacy and so generous with sharing information. And yes, you can picture the portrait, you know, this gold, you know, this large, almost life-size gold framed portrait in a family home, and then the garment, you know, the dress, and you know, packed away in a trunk. Just a terrific story, and yeah, so she is our cover girl here.
So was that the kickoff for you starting to research, to think about publishing a book along this topic?
So my PhD, as you mentioned, is in art history. So I'm a trained art historian in paintings of the United States from the 19th century. And my focus has always been images of women. So I've been staring at portraits of women, you know, here in the Met by Sargent and, you know, and others for years and years. And it occurred to me very early on that the majority of the canvas is taken up by the fashion that the women are wearing, fashion and hair. I could go on for hours about hairstyles as well. But really, this topic came about when I was writing an article on John Singer Sargent's Madame X, the very famous portrait of the redheaded, you know, narrow-waisted woman from New Orleans who very famously had. She was wearing sort of a skimpy black dress, and very famously one of the sleeves was portrayed falling off her shoulder, and it created a scandal and all the rest. And I was writing about her red hair, and then I started thinking more about the dress, and everything about the dress, and Nicole Kidman wore the dress on the cover of, you know, Vogue or Elle one year, and
Right.
for what's been written about the dress, no one had really dug into who the maker of the dress could have possibly been. And so I started digging. There's one little slip of paper, you know, there's one citation that says it may have been made by the House of Worth, but we don't know. And so that opened. And so that's when I started the Maison Félix. I hope I didn't say House of Worth. There's a citation saying that the black dress may have been made by on Félix. We have no proof, but I went down the trail trying to figure this out, and we won't ever be able to prove that it was by Félix. But then I just found this, wealth of information on the house, and they were in competition with the House of Worth. And so I know, Kevin, you and I share a love for the Maison Félix, which we're both trying to get. And FIDM has 5 dresses, 5 garments.
We now have 5, yes. 5 and counting. There's got to be more out there for me to get.
A handful at the Met. And there's another handful throughout the U.S. Oh, there's the opera gown.
So this is in the Fitta Museum collection, and when Elizabeth was researching her book, she reached out to scholars all over the country. She didn't limit to like the New York area or New England, Newport area, but I'm glad that you really did search for women's stories across the country. And we had actually just recently acquired this ensemble. It really is beyond incredible because it's made of lace that has then all been embroidered over the lace, and with dimensional silk lilacs, and each lilac in the center has a pearl embroidered in. I mean, it really looks like carved ivory. I mean, it's incredible.
It's extraordinary. The Maison Félix was such a powerful, presence in French couture at the time, and so much had been lost. But then you find these exquisite garments that do survive, like this particular opera gown, and I was so glad to be able to feature that in the book. Did you once tell me that there was also a little girl's outfit
It's not a little girl's. Oh. No, actually, because I believe, and Christina can correct me if I'm wrong, that this is associated with the Countess of Craven. And there is a matching opera gown that was worn by her daughter. So they went to the opera together in matching dresses. And if you can see in the photo, if my camera, the phone won't go kind of blurry, the whole front of Mama's dress is 3-dimensional flowers. It's like a bouquet going down, and they're all dimensional, and they're all en tremblant because they're on wires. The gowns match exactly, except the daughter's dress, it is a plain front. It's all lace, but it's not en tremblant flowers, and nothing's missing because each dress is literally in perfect condition. And I've always been amazed how incredible they must have looked going into the opera together in these matching gowns.
Mm-hmm. We have so many surviving photographs of, not so many, but we have a decent amount of surviving photographs. But I would do anything to have a surviving photograph of that mother and daughter duo.
Totally.
So tell us more about the recent acquisition that you made of a Félix that you were just telling me about yesterday.
Oh, and I don't have a photo of it. I sent you photos last night. Yeah, our really great supporter, Stephen Porterfield. I know you guys have heard me talk about him before. He's in Midland, Texas, and he's a dealer in historic dress and antiques and furniture and porcelain and you name it. And he is all over the country all the time. And he acquired an entire collection of dress that included an absolutely magnificent Félix ensemble in this kind of gray with an undertone of green iridescent velvet, and the whole thing is embroidered in black and gold jet work and underlaid with gold lame. I mean, it's from 1891, and it really is extraordinary. And so I have to thank Stephen Porterfield for very kindly sending me a text photo of it, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And he's like, well, don't you want it? And because I was kind of stunned, and I was like, well, yeah. And he's like, okay, you can have it. So he just donated. So that's actually the reason that just happened. And he donated it for a reason, and it was in honor of the Fitta Museum Fashion Council. And that is the support group, volunteer support group that raises money for the Fitta Museum so we can acquire objects. And and the Fashion Council raised the money to acquire the 2 Félix, the mother and daughter dresses.
Outstanding.
So he just loves what they do, and so he wanted to honor them, and he found this incredible Félix gown and donated it.
Absolutely exquisite. We were saying that Félix, really the paper trail picks up, and the image trail picks up, and the garment trail in the really the 1880s and the 1890s. And then they sort of abruptly closed 1901, reasons that speculated on in the book. But we were saying, there's just so much more to uncover because we think they were around, at least since the early 1860s. But they weren't, they were either building themselves up and they weren't advertising yet. They did famously put out one sort of glossy gazette in 1897, and there's one copy left of it with fashion plates. But what else is out there? The search goes on, but this is a major house that we need to know more of, and really, having the 5 garments out there at your museum is going to be, I think, the headquarters for this house already.
Yes, if anybody who's watching has the Fay Leaks archive, it would be really nice of you to donate it to the Fitta Museum. Thank you very much. You think a house that existed for more than 40 years and was literally at the top of its game throughout the whole time, that there would be more documentation, more paperwork somewhere in somebody's attic, in Paris or something. We hope one day it will, surface.
Protected family members and descendants, and they don't have much. There are no business records. That's another reason why this book came about, is that we, when you say 19th century couture, most people think House of Worth, and rightfully so. I mean, there's no arguing against the fact that they were the leaders in the industry, but the industry was not, one house. It was,
right,
tens of houses, and they were flourishing and they were competing with one another. And so Fay Leaks gives us one competitor, and we talk about Doucet and Pingat and Paquin, and there's so much more work to do, which is super exciting to me. But to your point about what survives, the House of Worth gowns were really passed down through families, and the business records survive. And so, Amy de la Haye and other scholars have done really terrific archival work on the business records of Worth through the V&A, and there's sketches, and there's, fashion plates that survive. But for these other houses, we're putting together pieces of the puzzle, and it just takes a little bit longer. But I wanted to introduce these other houses to the general reader, also to the scholarly reader, and then introduce who their customers were, because they were all sharing the same customers.
And I think the American, because we really were a major supporter of this industry. And of course, we had a huge country, lots and lots of different cities had different social hubs. It wasn't just Newport or New York. You had Chicago, you had Cincinnati, you had San Francisco. I mean, it went all the way across the country. San Diego was a major wintering resort for people. And you had all of the technology through train travel, through much quicker steamships. You had the printing presses, you had the fashion magazines. I mean, there was so much that was being disseminated. So the elite could actually participate, but then so could everybody else, just like we do now with, Instagram and reality TV. I mean, it was the same thing was going on in the 19th century.
Absolutely. You just reminded me, because you were talking about some of the other cities other than New York, Newport. And yesterday we were talking about the fact that I would be showing some images of works that didn't make it into the book. So this is the one that got away. This is a Boucheron necklace for Mrs. McKay, Marie Louise McKay, and she was from the West. Her husband was in silver mining, and here at the Met we have an extraordinary set of a Tiffany set of teacups and serving utensils that were made from the silver that her husband's company mined. And so this necklace was made in Paris, and it was said that the sapphires matched her eyes. And so I wanted to sort of bring a little more dynamic to the picture, and that, doing a lot of talking about dresses, gowns, but also the jewelry and the shoes, the hats, and
Right.
you know, and all the stoles and everything. So, oh, and parasols. Let's look at parasols. But anyway, I wanted to have just one image of a piece of jewelry in this book, and I tried and tried to get in touch with the company to no avail, and there's just no, high res images. So that is one I got away, but I would love to have that book. And let's
Volume 2.
And then I also brought some shoes because I didn't have space to show shoes in the book. But this is a pair for the Met. It's by Ferry. They were in Paris. If you know more about them, tell me now. They date to 1885 to 90. They're evening slippers, and they were made for an American woman, and her name was Abigail Prince. And she was a client of Worth, Paquin, and Doucet. And, talking about how much more research there still is to do on these women, I didn't even get to her. I was spending, so much time on the Astors, the Vanderbilts, the McKay, the Goelettes, and Edith Kingdon Gould that, this is just like the topic that keeps on giving. So there's just still so much more to do, which is super exciting to me.
Well, we're working on a project, Christina and I, about the French couture and the American women, because so many of the examples that we've acquired over the last 20 years, while we don't know who wore everything, like the gown that Stephen donated to Félix, we don't know who wore it, unfortunately. But a number of them, we have the provenance, and it's American. And we want to do a project that is the French couture, just like you did, slanted to the American clientele, the American Gilded Age industries, and then how they were used and why they were used, and what they meant in their day. And that's why I just think your book is so incredible. And let me tell you, your bibliography, everybody, and what I love also is that the bibliography is complete all the way through. If you're reading the notes, what's in the notes is listed in the bibliography. And I've already been ordering books and looking up articles that I have never seen before that are so marvelous, that are going to help us, Christina and I, with this project. And
That's just
it's down the road, but
exactly what I had hoped for when putting this book together, is that hoping that it'll have a long life, and that it'll be cited by, scholars such as you and Christina, and for your exhibition, and to help, put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I do have to give a shout out to MIT Press for just being the most wonderful partners. The acquiring editor, understood from the very beginning what I was trying to do. And I remember asking her in the initial meeting, I said, how do you feel about footnotes? And she said, we love them. And I said, okay,
hallelujah.
I want to work with you, because, in publishing, paper is so costly, and we're always trying to keep page count down. But yes, lots of footnotes and long bibliography. However, the book is still geared toward all types of readers. So I wanted it to be accessible to, say, like the upperclassmen in college, all the way straight through to PhD and beyond.
Yeah, and it's wonderful that you have photos throughout the whole book, and it's not just the little section in the middle of the book with a few, images, and then the rest of it is text, and you're reading and trying to imagine what all of these things look like. You actually present them to us, which is great.
Thank you for noticing. I fought really hard to have full color throughout the book, very costly and difficult to get a publisher to sign on to. But when I'm reading and when I'm researching, I want the images, on the page where I'm reading the information about them, and not relegated to an alley in the middle of the book. So yeah, and that's also what has made it, popular with, moms and grandmothers who, might call themselves lifelong learners, and enjoying it as a gift as well.
So one of the highlights, I think, of the 19th century New York society was the 1883 Vanderbilt Ball. And can you tell us a little bit about that? And then there's such an incredible connection with the Fitta Museum that we were able to contribute to you and your research about the topic.
So I'm going to hold up my sets of images here. So this is, let's look at the exterior first. The Vanderbilt home that we'll be talking about. This was on Fifth Avenue in the 60s, in the East 60s. And so this was Mr. Vanderbilt's house, Alva Vanderbilt and William Vanderbilt. It was built 1883 to 1884. And then there's this amazing, there was a color book that was put out by Earl Shin, that was the artist Earl Shin, whose name was Edward Strahan, put out a book, which was basically a publicity piece for the Vanderbilt home. And the interiors, I just love how it's in color, because usually you only see these in black and white. You can get a sense of how lush the interior was. Those tapestries, greenery, sculpture, painting, sculpture, decorative arts, you name it. So in 1883, when the house was finally finished, Alva Vanderbilt, the matron of the home, she held a housewarming party. It was March 23rd, 1883. She invited about 1,000 people. We think 600. And it was a costume ball. So they would call it a ball. She did not tell people exactly what period to dress. So people came in dressed from all different periods. So 17th, 18th century, Renaissance. Some people, men, women, and children, came after the opera on a Monday night and had dinner at 11 o'clock in the room they called the gymnasium. They had dancing and there all night. And one of the most extraordinary aspects of this party are the documents that we have. So we have documentation both in the newspapers, in memoirs, in letters, but also photographs. So the society photographer, Jose Mora, took these terrific photographs. They were staged, but you get a sense of the variety of the costumes that the women wore. And I think you might have something to hold up.
Now, Lee put out for the announcement about our conversation today some of these images. And here is Emily Vanderbilt Sloane, if you can see right there.
Yes.
And she went to the ball. She was Alva's sister-in-law. And she went to the ball as Little Bo Peep. And that is the actual gown there that we acquired about 10 years ago. It was in a private collection up in Seattle, Washington, that I found out about, but did not know the provenance at all. I mean, it was just, a magnificent gown. The poppies are all dimensional silk. The brocade is a huge poppy pattern. And I swear the poppies are the size of your head in the brocade. So I was then in the FIDM library looking for something, and it's always one of those instances where you find information you could never locate otherwise accidentally because you're looking for something else. And I literally flipped the page and there was the photograph of Emily wearing the gown. I was like, oh my God, there it is. So, and this was before we acquired the dress, and I sent the private collector Xerox at that time, Xerox photocopies to show him who wore his dress and where, and how really, really important and rare it is.
So rare. And it was made by Catherine Donovan, a New York dressmaker, who worked with the Vanderbilts and other members of high society. She was a dressmaker who was in business for a very long time. I was walking in Midtown, right near where her shop was the other day, so right near where the Empire State Building hadn't been built yet, but she was, I think, 32nd and 5th, where she had her storefront. And she would copy, as did many stateside dressmakers, would copy designs from Paris, but she also created her own designs. And this one she may very well have used one of the party costume that was out, by Ardern Holt. There were several editions of it, but it was basically a handbook of different costumes that you might want to make at home at your dressmaker. And Bo Peep is one of them. And so Mrs. Donovan put this together for Sloane Vanderbilt, for Vanderbilt's, and there it is. But to have that three-dimensional garment exist and to be able to match it up with the black and white photograph is so rare. And I think I mean, off the top of my head, I can only think of the electric light dress from the fall that also
Yep.
the gown in the Museum of the City of New York. Maybe there's one or two others, but Jose Mora is another research project in and of itself that I'd like to get onto someday, because his photographs are just extraordinary records that we can use to retrace some of these costumes.
Yeah, the electric light dress was worn by Alice Vanderbilt, who was the sister-in-law of Alva Vanderbilt, who actually the mansion was the open house. And I also think that Cornelius Vanderbilt II's suit survives as well. He went as like Louis XVI or something.
Yeah,
I think he survives.
There are a bunch of men who went as the Louis, like various Louis.
Right.
There's one in New Jersey that you told me. I think I have Cornelius Vanderbilt. I was looking at this book of portraits from Newport, and when you're looking for fashion, sometimes you come upon portraits that don't really make it into like big portraiture exhibitions, and to me they're even more interesting than some of the bigger names. I'll hold up just one other one, that because Carolyn Aster comes into so many conversations when we're talking about this period, but Carolyn Aster was sort of Mrs. Alva Vanderbilt's rival. So Alva Vanderbilt is the one who had the big ball in 1883, and Carolyn Aster was sort of the head of New York society, and she's the Astor that we call the Astor. This is before she was a big name, and I just love this. It's an early portrait of Carolyn Aster.
Great.
You just don't usually see this. This is, before she was really a matron of New York.
It's like 1855 or so.
Yeah, you can tell by the hair too.
Right.
Everything you see, she notoriously didn't like being, having her image taken. So you don't see very many drawings of her. You don't see, engravings. You don't see very many photographs or portraits. But so this is a rare one. I was very glad it was reproduced in this book in color. And then here's another Astor where there was a bust made. So once you start digging into these American women, you find these works of art that, maybe you would have walked by in the past, but then as an art historian, it makes you stop and think, these were living, breathing people, and
yes,
what were they choosing to wear?
And I've always thought it was really amazing, honestly, that these garments have survived, because they were meant to be a season. And then these women moved on to yet the next season's clothing. And they were not meant to survive. And, we think of ourselves as kind of really, look, we're here. You and I are talking right now. I'm wearing a shirt. This shirt will probably outlast me. And, just like the gowns that we're talking about today that have survived, they were so ephemeral, and they are so ephemeral. And yet they are what we get to look at today when talking about these women and the world that they inhabited.
That's right. And we really owe, the foresight of some of their descendants, a big debt. We have at least 14 or 15 garments here in the Met that were donated by Carolyn Aster's nephews. And, they're just, and they're all the big label names, but they're here, in some of the shoes, and not all of them are in the greatest condition, but to have, sort of a critical mass together is, invaluable.
I think one of the most hilarious stories in her book is related to Carolyn Aster, and it's the dresses that she had seized by the customs agent.
Oh, yes.
Because of import duties, and these women, they had all the money in the world, and they had kinds of money that, you and I, well, maybe you have, but I don't. And yet, so it was really nothing for them to buy these clothes. And, I think what I have researched with the Titanic and the values of clothing for like 1912, an average couture garment was about $300. Now, that was not an embroidered ball gown, which could be around $1,000 to $1,500 each. So if you have $20 million, and a lot of these people did, that's nothing to spend. And yet for the average person, that was a tremendous amount of money. Whereas somebody, an average person, may actually make about $1,500 a year. To have a dress cost that, is astronomical. So here is this great story you found. I've never read about it before, about Carolyn Aster and trying to skirt the New York customs agents.
That's right. She bought 2 Felix dresses in Paris. She was heading home. Here's like a little vignette to help us set the scene. A traveling trunk by Vuitton and an advertisement. Where is this? 1888. So women who were traveling from the U.S. to France would come with their trunks, and they would send home they would travel home with their purchases on the ship.
And trunks and trunks and trunks and trunks.
Stacks and stacks and stacks. She had bought, however many dresses, but 2 of them were by Felix, and she gets stopped at customs, supposed to pay taxes, duties on them, and she refused. So the duties, came to probably a total of $300 because these would have been top of the line dresses, which would have cost more. And she refused to pay the taxes, and so they go up to auction. So there's so many contradictions, I think, but in the lives of these women. So you think about, that they had, $20 million to their names, but they also were fairly pragmatic. I try to get at that aspect of the book too, is that they were buying in Paris, but they were also commissioning their local dressmakers like Donovan to make a secondary bodice to switch out, with one of the fancy ensembles that they had gotten in France, so that they could extend the wear of the gown, wear it to more than one occasion or more than one time of day, since they were changing throughout the day so many times, upward of 6 times a day, some of them. And but they were also shrewd in their spending, and that was one of the main points that I'm trying to make, is that yes, these were wealthy women, part of society, and yes, they were spending their husbands and their fathers and their brothers' money, but they were doing it with intention. And we have invoices, we have letters that explain the thought processes that the women were using before they placed an order. I found one letter from a woman in Chicago who was staying in Chicago, but her son was going on a grand tour. And so she writes to her son and says, go to Mrs. So-and-so and have her find me a black parasol, and make sure you don't pay too much for it. Make sure it's real silk and bring it home for me. But she didn't. It's hilarious because she didn't want him to mess it up. She was like, go to this other American woman who's staying on, the Rue de la Paix, and get her advice so you don't mess it up, and bring it home for me. So it's extraordinary.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing that there's so much behind just the very beautiful gown. We get to enjoy the beauty and the craftsmanship and the creativity and the kind of over the top a lot of the time aspects, but like you say, there's a pragmatic aspect. It's especially an American pragmatism, and that goes back to our founding roots, and how interesting that even in these kind of exalted, times for these individuals, that is something that has been taught to them from you. And that they would still bring that aspect to their dressing to show off to each other.
That's right. It's a through line through the century, and it's passed down from mother to daughter through the generations. There's so many generations of the women because they were having children while they were young. So sometimes the mother and daughter are only 20 years apart, and they're both buying couture at the same time, which, when you're in the archives, you kind of like, did that dress belong to Astor, or did it belong to Carrie Aster, the daughter? You drive yourself, crazy trying to figure out whose nephew was who. So it's important to have a family tree and a cheat sheet when you're working on these women. But I also brought a painting by Burrow to show, a sense of the streets where the women were shopping. The Rue de la was the highest couture where Worth was, and Doucet, and I think let's see, can you see the word Douce cut off at the top?
Top right corner for everybody watching. And just so everybody knows, it's backwards. So you're seeing the end, the tail end of the name.
That's right. So this is about 1900, but you can see how bustling the streets were. And, you know, the women shopping, they had their drivers. And then there's also these really great paintings by Burroughs showing, you know, showing the women who had just shopped, you know, they don't carry. They're walking. They've just left the shop, but then behind them is either the maid or a shop assistant carrying all the hat boxes and, you know, off kilter from the weight of them.
You have got to get out here so we can have like a whole play week in storage. And I'll literally pull out every single couture dress that we have and all the couture hats and everything else because you would just love it. And everybody else too, everybody watching, you're all invited. You know, that's why we're here, and it's to share all of this stuff that we love and find amazing and research constantly. So
it's
because
such a collection that you've been building, it really is.
Well, we hope to dress it, photograph it, and get it out in a publication and an exhibition someday. But it just takes so long, and you know, conservation. A lot of the dresses, they are, you know, the late 19th century and early 20th century. They are the worst time, honestly, for a lot of these kinds of fabrics and silks that were once so glorious and have literally powdered away and shattered away into nothing. And you're really kind of excited if you find a garment that is in great condition and you wonder, how did this one escape the kind of tin weighting and processes that a lot of these manufacturers put their materials through that just have not survived the ages very well.
That's right. And you don't want to rush conservation. That's one of those processes you wait for. And then the photography that you all do, I mean, there's really nothing like it. I've been enjoying your sporting wear fashion book. Who takes photos like that?
Oh, thank you. Gosh, that's so nice. That's actually what we're hoping to do with our couture book, and it's to talk about what we're talking about today, but being able to show the actual objects throughout the book and have the objects lead the discussion. There's another lady that lives in New York, and she's in upstate New York, Kasia Stempniak, and I've interviewed with her, and she was one of our interns, and she's very interested in this topic as well, and in the same kind of way that we are, that it is the women who wore the clothes, yes, but also how many different design houses there were at the time. And it wasn't just Worth and Paquin Doucet, and it's great that we have those and we have so much information. But there were extraordinary artisans in the couture that, like Felix, because you have dug in and found as much as seems to be available. We hope there's more. But there's so many other stories to be told. And that's one of the things with our project is we want to talk about a lot of these other couture houses and show examples that people just don't know these names and the stories behind them.
That's terrific. And especially if, you know, every once in a while there'll be, you know, a curator at museum who will write to me and say, you know, I heard you're researching these lesser known houses. If you come across this one name, will you let me know? And I do, and I keep sort of a Google map of where the houses were located so that I can see who, you know, literally which designers were walking by each other on the street going to work.
Right.
I mean, they were so closely packed in Paris. But it's, you know, the important point is that if there's just one garment with one label of a maker in a collection, it's still worth researching. You know, it could, maybe there's just one, maybe there is, you know, but maybe there are a few more, and what can that one maker tell us? So I, you know, how I jot down every name.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing too. And one of the dresses in our collection is by Delaporte, and I had never heard of it before, didn't know anything about it, but Kasia did some research on it and found out that it was a pair of sisters, and they were very young. They won a design competition run by the state, and anybody who won, they would set them up in business. And that is what happened to the Delaporte sisters. that they it's almost like Project Runway, you
Yeah.
know, of the 19th century. And it was done by the French state to support new talent and try to find new talent. And, you know, and this gown, I've never seen another Delport garment. If anybody knows of any, please let us know. It is one of the most beautiful and extravagant garments I have ever seen. I mean, it is in the class of Worth and Paquin and Félix. And yet, who knows who these people are? And Kasha did all this research and found, and it was really kind of extraordinary. And so these are the kinds of stories we hope to bring out with actual garments that we have found and acquired for the museum. And I have to say, I'm going to say this publicly too, Elizabeth. Christina and I don't want to just do this book on our own, just the two of us sitting in our office. We want scholars like you to participate and to do a chapter, you know, maybe talk about something that you weren't able to put in your book because there just wasn't enough room.
And Kevin, count me in. That is just a dream come true. And thank you for announcing that. I mean, that really is, you know, I keep saying that this topic is the gift that keeps on giving. And you know you've chosen the right research area when you are still researching after your book comes out. So I would glad to pass on lots of information and analysis of designers that I didn't get to yet.
So you showed us that fabulous necklace, and what one story would you like to have included in your book that you weren't able to?
Oh, goodness me. Let me see what
Just one.
what else did I bring? Let's see. So I don't know. There's this designer Rodriguez who I did get to bring into the book just a little bit. But this Rodriguez dress is from the Kyoto Costume Institute, and because communication was difficult, I just feel like I've only scratched the surface on this one designer, and I just think there's more. I think the head of the house was a woman, very, very interested in that, you know, Rodriguez was Spanish, and then how did she make it to Paris and have a house in her name? Was their husband involved at the beginning? Many of the women who eventually made their names because their husbands died young. So aspect that I like to look into is that you know, a lot of times the husband was a tailor and the woman was a seamstress, and then the husband dies young and the woman takes over. So I'm sort of interested to go a little bit further there. So I think that's one designer that a little bit got away.
I love that gown. It's such a beautiful, you know, installation shot. And I've never seen another example of that designer's work. So again, it's like anybody watching as you're researching and you come across things, keep in mind that we would love to hear, you know, what you find and what you can contribute to this, so we can keep the research and the discussion going and learn more and more about these women. And I mean, you have Worth and Doucet and Pingat and so many men at this time, but it was a woman-dominated industry, and yet we don't know their stories. Paquin has surfaced to the top, and then later in the 20th century, you get more like Jean Lanvin or the Callot sisters, but there were so many women who need to have their stories, you know, told and brought out again.
So many, and the American makers too. I mean, the immigrant women were, you know, I mean, it's the story of New York for the most part. You mentioned the Callot sisters. This is a caricature. Can you see the name on the box? So this was a dress.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Sur Callot. Mm-hmm.
Right. So you have a delivery man dropping off dresses that the wife had bought, and this is the husband who's very saddened and shocked by the bill, the invoice for the dresses. But I'm also fascinated how the the salons, the places where the women were shopping, those were female spaces. I mean, the men husbands may have been in a waiting room somewhere, but I think mostly they were at home and just getting, receipts. So again, you see the center of power being with the women.
Yeah, I kind of feel sorry for that son being commissioned to get a parasol for his mother. This poor guy must have been completely out of his element.
He was probably 17 years old and being sent out for a black silk parasol.
Not knowing what to do, and terrified of mama, bringing back the wrong parasol and maybe getting a paddling with it.
Exactly. Hoping that the letter gets lost in the mail or the package gets lost.
The last chapter in your book, I think, is really fascinating because not a lot of people that I know of have ever really researched what happens to a lot of these garments after the fact. And I don't mean just they end up in museum collections 100 years later, but actually in the day when, as a society woman, let's say you go to Paris twice a year, you're getting your seasonal collections, right? And once that one season is over with and you've moved on to acquiring your next, group of clothes, what happens to those incredibly expensive, valuable commodities?
Right. So there's a chapter in the book that I call the underworld and afterlife and reuse, renovation, reuse, re-wearing. Those are all terms that we're familiar with today, especially in this moment right now when thrifting is so big and popular and Poshmark and thrift up and we have sustainability in our minds. Back then, I would not say sustainability was on their minds. I don't think they were recycling with a purpose, but the women who had the highest forms of the couture, they would wear it, and then it would have a secondary life, meaning they would pass it on to a maid, perhaps, yes, or they would pass it on to a secondary shop or thrift shop. There was a major industry for secondary clothing, and so it was also a practice that came from royalty that another scholar has worked on heavily. Queen Alexandra passed down her couture garment to a maid, and it was a way of valuing, I think, the materials. This is another aspect that comes out of the book, that women who are buying really had a sense of material, silks and velvets, and they were shopping for the highest quality, and everybody knew how to sew, and their dressmakers were close by. So there is part of me that thinks that even after something had slightly gone out of fashion for the at the top, think that they wanted it to have this other life, no matter who was wearing it. And we also have records of actresses buying secondhand clothes and wearing them on stage as well. So the lives of the dresses, they go on and on.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And it's just digging out those little stories here and there and think of how much was really going on that did not get recorded and we just don't know today. But I think it's an important point. And for me, having had the great privilege of publishing books also, that your publishers are looking at your work in ways that they think will be attractive to consumers today. And is it relevant to today? Just like the sportswear project that Christina and I, that just came out this year also, that our world is sport, and the American Federation of Arts, our partners, they recognize that, yeah, wait, this is a really great topic that hasn't been discussed the way the Fitted Museum is presenting it. And it's going to be relevant to what's going on right now, just like sustainability, going green, recycling, upcycling, no waste. All of this is in our world today. And you have brought that aspect out in your book now about dresses from 125 years ago. And I think that's really smart. It's a smart way of thinking. So anybody who's watching us today who wants to publish a book, and it doesn't matter when or what the time period or anything or your interest, but try to think of ways that will make your topic of interest relevant to what's going on today, because you'll have more success with your project.
That's excellent advice. And, as somebody who works in museum book publishing on very different topics, it's true. You're almost a little bit, you're trying to spot the trends that are 2 years, 3 years down the road. And so I can't, thank enough MIT Press and the most special acquiring editor who had that foresight, 2.5 years ago when I first came to her. So it's a smart observation. Thank you for bringing that out.
How much material visual material did you present for your publisher to get a gist of what you were trying to do, and that would also kind of basically suck them in to your vision?
One signature image.
Wow.
One signature image, and that was something that I worked really hard to narrow it down on, and I asked, friends here in production who look at images all day long for books, and I said, I'm trying to decide between these three when I go pitch to publishers. And I knew all along that it would be an image from the Vanderbilt Ball of 1883 that we were talking about, and it's Mrs. Fearing Strong who was wearing the cat outfit.
Yeah, right.
I mean,
right.
Who wouldn't buy a book with that has the cat, the woman with the cat image in it? So she was a guest at the ball, and her nickname was Puss, and she's wearing a black collar that has her nickname on it, wearing a stuffed kitten on her head. So her headdress is an actual stuffed kitten. And it made all the descriptions of the party in the papers and in memoirs, but I have not found very much more on her. Such a statement at that party, and she's almost completely lost. I've found a few citations about her husband, who is a philanthropist, but Kate Fearing Strong, she sold the book for me. It's really wonderful. It's a white kitten headdress stuff, and then her costume is like a cat woman, and she is actually made with cat's tails. So not exactly politically correct today.
I knew it was in here. That's what I've been trying to find. There it is.
Page number for you right away. But there she is.
So for us with sporting fashion, I knew the minute that we took the photograph of the 1930s motorcycling ensemble that it was going to be the cover.
Yes.
And that it was going to be the image that sold our project. And it's true. It was that one image that really did it. We presented lots and lots of photos, but that was the image that captured everybody's imagination when we were trying to describe what this project was going to be. So we've got to wrap it up. I can't believe we're already an hour gone. It goes by so fast. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm sorry for the kerfuffle at the beginning, but thank you for jumping over to my personal account and joining today. We hope that this will then be transported over to the Fit and Museum account for those who want to watch it again. And I want to thank you, Elizabeth, for taking time out of your very busy schedule. You're actually in your office at the Met right now, and joining me today to talk about something that's so interesting and old and fashion-timey, but still totally relevant to so much of what's going on today and how we live.
I can't thank you enough. This has been so much fun, and I owe you some research on Madame Olympe, and I have some really exciting information to send your way. So the research continues.
Thank you. Everybody have a really safe, wonderful holiday season. Stay safe, stay warm wherever you are. And we look forward to seeing you in New Year 2022. Take care. Bye-bye.